Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar focusing on how robotics can help with process automation. This webinar is part of a series of webinars delivered by the William J. Clinton Leadership Institute at Queen's Business School and the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund to support the digital transformation of local micro and small businesses. So as you can see, there is a sequence of 8 webinars. We are halfway through that sequence. It started with a webinar focusing on digital transformation, and then we started moving through the 6 technologies funded through the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund, which are big data, Internet of Things and smart technologies, robotics and cobotics, artificial intelligence and machine learning, immersive technologies, virtual reality and augmented reality, blockchain, and lastly, we have a session which is meant to help organizations develop their digital strategy. Okay, so please do consider attending any of the relevant webinars. In terms of introductions, so my name is Andrei Gurka. I'm a senior lecturer in strategy and innovation management at Queen's Business School, and I will later be joined by David Webb from Reliance Automation. So I will give a brief overview of the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about robotics, cobotics, just to provide an introduction, and then David will jump in and he will discuss the challenges that small organizations have with implementing robotics and cobotics, and also provide some case examples which should serve as inspiration. So the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund is a grant scheme that aims to stimulate digital transformation in micro and small businesses in Northern Ireland, and it comes in recognition of the financial struggles that these small organizations have and their difficulty in adopting technology. So the purpose of this funding scheme is to help small organizations actually buy the relevant technologies and implement them in their businesses. Very importantly, this is about business transformation rather than simple digitization of operations. By business transformation, we're looking at developing and implementing new processes, coming up with new or improved products or services, restructuring the organization to account for these changes, as opposed to a mere digitization of certain operations. So, for example, if you're thinking about starting issuing digital invoices, that would not really count as a business transformation. And it will not be funded through the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund. The fund provides funding for capital expenditure. It doesn't directly provide support or assistance or consultancy, but I will talk at the end and present a variety of support that is available around this funding scheme. So overall, the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund is a pot of £7.5 million in capital funding spread into 5 different calls. We are now between call number 3 and call number 4. The money comes from all local councils in Northern Ireland. It is administered by the Newry, Mourne and Down district councils and supported by Invest NI. In terms of eligibility, micro and small businesses with 1 to 48 employees based in Northern Ireland are eligible. These companies have to be VAT registered for at least 12 months. The funding is open for all industry sectors, excluding primary agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. When companies apply for the funding, they have to present an actual digital transformation plan, which should be centered around 6 key technologies, which are big data, Internet of Things, and smart technologies, robotics and cobotics, immersive technologies, virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and lastly, blockchain would be the 6th technology. As I already mentioned, it's about funding capital expenditure, so buying equipment, hardware, devices, or developing systems and software. So, for example, basic office equipment is not covered by this funding. Also, subscription fees to access databases or any kind of, let's say, online tool are not covered by this grant. Lastly, the applying organization should meet relevant de minimis criteria, which essentially means that the funded organization should not have received more than £325,000 in subsidies or governmental funding over the last 3 years. The grant process consists of 6 stages. We are now before the first stage, so we are between calls now. Call number 3 has ended. Call number 4 will start in February or March next year. So once the call is out, we will be conducting pre-application briefing sessions in person at all district councils in Northern Ireland. And following that, there is a process of expression of interest. If your company is deemed eligible, then it will be invited to stage 3 to apply to make a formal application for funding. These applications will be then assessed by the local councils and by the Clinton Leadership Institute at Queen's University Belfast, and the successful applications will receive a letter of offer. At this point, companies are invited to actually go ahead and buy the technology and implement it. It's important to point out that in the first instance, the companies will have to cover all the expenditure. At the end of the implementation stage, money can be claimed back from the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund. The amount of funding is between £5,000 and £20,000, excluding VAT, and this amount of money should represent up to 70% of the total value of the project. The companies themselves will have to fund the remaining 30% of the cost of the project. As I said, we are between calls. Call number 4 will start February or March next year. However, as a change in the process from the previous calls, you can now at any time express your interest in this funding scheme. So to do so, you can either scan the code bar on the screen or simply go to dtff.co.uk, find more information about the funding scheme, and make your formal expression of interest on the website. Moving towards today's webinar, as I said, I will briefly provide an overview of automation, robotics, cobotics, talk about the applications, and then I will hand over to David, who will talk about challenges that companies are facing when it comes to implementing these technologies, how these challenges can be overcome, and provide some case examples. At the end, I will step back in and tell you a few things about the support that is available for organizations. So some of the key concepts will be automation, which clearly means using machines or technologies to perform tasks with minimal human intervention. And robots are those machines which can be pre-programmed to perform a number of tasks. Now, robotics have been around for close to 100 years now. The first robot was introduced in the 1930s, and it was a crane that was moving logs from one place to another. It was programmed with sheets of papers with holes punched into it. Now, the first industrial robots were deployed in the early 60s. The first robotic arms were called Unimate, were produced by a company called Unimation, and were deployed on the production lines of General Motors. From that point on, robots and automation became the norm in many industries, especially in manufacturing industries. And it is important to point out that these automated production lines were not necessarily safe for humans to actually work next to the robots. So essentially, when humans had to intervene, the production lines would need to be stopped, changes would have to be made, and then humans would have to withdraw, and then the production lines would start again. Now, in the late noughties, early 2010s, a new kind of robots, collaborative robots, were introduced. And these robots are actually safe to work next to humans. So they have embedded cameras, 3D sensors, safety features are embedded within them, and they are safe to work around. It's important to
Andre,
yes.
we are still seeing the key concepts slide.
Yes, that's fine.
Oh, okay, perfect. No
That's
worries.
fine. I'll switch some. So it's it's important to know that these cobots now, they are multitask. They can be easily reconfigured to move to change from one task to another. They can learn from human demonstration, and they have generally a faster return on investment than other types of industrial robots. Now, in manufacturing, right, robots and cobots can be used for a variety of purposes: drilling, machining, milling, welding, assembly and dispensing, finishing and sanding, painting and coating can all be done with robots and cobots. And David will come in and will show you examples where picking, handling, and palletizing can also be done with industrial robots. Now, if your organization is not really in manufacturing, there are numerous applications for robots in other industries. For example, in construction, and you can see on the top left-hand side a robot that is doing paintwork. On the bottom left, there's a robot that's laying out bricks. In the middle, a robot that's drawing blueprints on a floor of a construction site, and then workers will come in and start their work there. Also, in hospitality, robots can be quite useful in taking orders, delivering orders, in the kitchen, preparing food, dispensing food, and so on. So actually, in any kind of industries, there can be applications for robotics and cobotics. It is simply a matter of looking with a creative eye on the operations of your organizations and seeing how robots can help. Now, some of the features of these industrial robots include cameras, 3D sensors, inbuilt safety features so that they're safe to work around. Now, these robots are aware of their environments, and they can adapt their actions to whatever is happening in their vicinity. Also, they're quite easy to program. So programming is not a very daunting task. Many of the cobots can learn from human demonstrations. So a person could grab the robotic arm and show what it needs to do, and then the cobot will replicate the same actions. CAD data can be transferred to them, so they can operate according to this CAD data. Further, they can be connected to other sensors within the production site. They can be integrated within ERP systems or MRP systems. Importantly, they have reduced weight, so they can easily be moved from one place to another on the shop floor. Some of them, they are multi-purpose, so they're quite versatile, and that is important because they can help saving space on the shop floor. So what traditionally was a process where a product or a component would move from one workstation to another, now we can see multiple tasks performed within a single location, within a so-called cell, and that can help reducing the footprint on the shop floor. Relating to this, there is a trend with many corporations moving towards the idea of micro plants or micro factories, and these micro plants are deployed even within established industries like the automotive industry. Lastly, it's important to point out the cost, which over the past decade has been decreasing. So the average cost of an industrial robot has dropped from the equivalent of about 47,000 US dollars to about 23 thousand US dollars in 2022, which means that the average industrial robot or cobot would be within the scope of the 20,000 pound grant provided by the Digital Transformation Flexible Fund. Of course, that doesn't include installation costs, which probably will have to be covered by each organization separately. In terms of benefits that can be gained from deploying these robots, there are reduced operational costs, reduced waste, reduced material usage, reduced errors, reduced energy consumptions. There are gains in terms of quality, precision, accuracy, gains in terms of productivity, speed, volume, the possibility to have a 24/7 operation capacity, and that there are improvements in safety. Right? So if there are operations that are hazardous in any way, right? They require strength, endurance, the use of dangerous tools or harmful material. This is where robots can be deployed very effectively. Now, since this is a funding scheme for micro and small organizations, it's important to point out that for this type of organizations, full automation is not really an option, and it should not be an option. Ideally, this type of organization should be looking at partial automation. So the reasons are fully automated production lines can be very, very expensive. And for small organizations that deal with small volumes of production, it will become impossible to break even using fully automated production lines. Even more, there's going to be a loss in flexibility. So small organizations would need flexibility to easily move from one batch of products to the next to provide higher customization for their customers. And that cannot be really achieved with fully automated production lines. So ideally, you should consider what is the choke point in your operations, the most difficult, challenging task, the one that requires accuracy, precision, endurance. That is probably the point in your operations where you should consider the introduction of robots, and then consider moving your workers towards other value-adding tasks like hand finishing, customization, after-sales support, which will help you differentiate from competitors. And one last point from me before I hand over to David. You should consider why you are looking to introduce robots, cobots in your operations. So what do you hope to achieve in doing that? And the why question is more important really than what type of robots should you get, how to implement them, because you can find support for that in a variety of places. But to answer the why question, you need to have some sort of a strategic outlook towards your operations. So you should consider developing some competitive advantage. And that competitive advantage for small organizations should be around quality, about differentiation, about customization. While I mentioned that these robots can reduce costs, it's usually a bad idea for a tiny organization to compete with bigger companies in terms of cost, right? Because the bigger companies will have economies of scale, and small organizations will struggle to keep up, even if they make some cost reductions on their operations. So for that reason, it's best to to consider introducing robots, cobots, to get some sort of competitive advantage around quality and customization. Also, you should consider how these robots impact your workflow, your processes, and how you will change these workflows and processes once you integrate the technology. Also consider how this may help you make better use of resources, right? Deploying workers in different value creating areas and making better use of your real estate, of your shop floor. And lastly, make sure that this investment makes financial sense. And luckily, there are quite a number of robot return on investment calculators available online free of charge. So you can put in the total system cost, the expected productivity gains, the cost of scrap parts, the expected downtime. And with that, you can figure out your break-even point, your total operation and operation costs and profits with and without the investment. So that should help the decision making. I will now hand over to David, and he will come in and talk about the challenges that are usually faced and provide some case examples for inspiration.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for having me on. So, just to give a brief introduction to myself, David Webb is my name. I'm the manager of Reliance Automation. I've been working in industry now for about 15 years or so. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. Started off in hydraulics, moved into IoT and communications, and then following that into automation. So who are Reliance, and why should you potentially be listening to ourselves today? So Reliance is a nearly 100-year company now. Next year we'll be celebrating our centenary, and it started off as a gear cutting company back when the Ford Model T was being manufactured in Ireland. And over the years we've diversified into several different things, especially in and around powertrain technology. So now the core company has bearings, gearboxes, belts, pulleys, and as those years passed by in around the 1970s or so, bearings moved on to linear bearings, which then moved on to servos, which then moved on to controls and robotics. And it's from that Reliance Automation was born. So about 25 years ago, we started to get involved in automation processes specifically, and we've just grown out of that. We divisionalized Reliance Automation there about 7 or 8 years ago, predominantly because the types of businesses that we were getting involved in was very different to our core company, Reliance. Reliance is very spares-driven business, whereas automation typically is a much more product-based or project-based sales process. What we do is we represent various different manufacturers from all around the world. We select the best robotic companies and automation companies and bring their products into the Irish market. And from that, we have the ability to be able to be completely unbiased as to the types of technology that are utilized to address an application. So as a little snapshot of what we've got across our company, because we were originally a distribution company, We have an immense amount of logistics in and around Ireland. We have four different branches, one in Dublin, Cork, Limerick, and Antrim, essentially covering off the whole of Ireland so that we're no more than a couple of hours away from everywhere. We're very involved with several different key influencers within this, such as InvestNI and Queens, and plenty of other organisations who are set up to assist and support the growth of business within Ireland. We have a huge amount of technical and mechanical expertise across the business, and we are already supplying and supporting a huge amount of businesses in Ireland. And the key thing that we see is that a lot of these businesses that we've been providing with equipment for years and years, people are looking to move into automation because of the challenges that we're facing these days. We saw off the back of COVID that we had a very heavy reliance on personnel, and with the challenges globally, a lot of that personnel isn't available these days. They've moved overseas, gone back to their own countries. And as a statistic, by the time we hit 2050, it's expected that there's going to be somewhere in the region of about 90 million people deficit within the manufacturing industry in Europe alone. This has come from various different new types of jobs that have become available that weren't your traditional jobs. A lot of people used to be happy to kind of sit on a production line for 40 years and have a career at that. There wasn't the opportunity to become programmers, social influencers, all these other types of jobs that have come up in these years that are a little bit more attractive than just sitting on a production line lifting boxes or putting things into even making cupcakes and the rest. So there's a pull away from that side of things, and hence the reason an awful lot of customers are having to look into automation. Now, our manufacturers and ourselves, we've gone out and done a few surveys as to what the kind of challenges are specifically for SMEs to create automation within their facilities. And the two biggest things that jump out are the ease of use of the equipment, and also the concerns around reliability. Again, robotics is nothing new. It's been around in the industry now for the last 40 odd years, but there's still an awful lot of companies that don't have a huge amount of automation in-house. This has come especially from the Irish market, where we've had the USP of being hand manufactured and very flexible, and the answer has always been to throw additional people at any one of the problems that we've got. Whereas, as we know, this is becoming more and more of a challenge. And also the reliability of the equipment. While there is no real question in the quality of an awful lot of these products, putting them together as a system and getting that system to actually work to produce to what it is that you need to do, that tends to be the biggest challenge. I had one example there very recently, a customer who's been working in manufacturing for 15 years. They've installed 50 plus machines across various manufacturing lines. And when we looked at a robotic solution, they said this is the biggest concern they've ever had. And when I asked them why, it wasn't a case that it was something that they hadn't seen out in videos, but it was just that they had never implemented it themselves and that they had no experience in-house for implementing it. So if there was any problems, they didn't know what to be looking for and how to be able to utilize it. When we ask people, what is stopping you from moving into these areas? A return on the investment is a big piece. Unfortunately, while automation is becoming an awful lot more economical, it is still a relatively large investment. And the kind of technologies that we're talking about, although we're very heavily aligned with the DTFF, as I said, it's up to 20,000. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that 70% has to equal 20,000. It could be a case where 20,000 is 25% of the project, but it's still a significant amount towards the ultimate capital that's required to implement these things. So it can just help take a little bit of that chip off and make the return on investment. The other piece there, again, is that lack of know-how in-house. We're just not as experienced with robotics and automation in Ireland. and across the UK. If you look at the amount of robots per capita worldwide, places like China have somewhere in the region of 2,000 robots per 10,000 personnel. Across the UK, the average is about 140. And in Ireland, we don't even figure on the graph. We're put in with other countries. So it's somewhere about 60 to 70 per 10,000 people across the production. And that's despite the amount of production that we do within Ireland. Looking at the types of technologies that people are looking to get involved in, you can actually see from our own surveys and one from our manufacturers, there's a very heavy alignment with the different areas that the DTFF are looking at specifically. So you can see 6 of those areas are very well aligned, and that's a big portion of the reason why we have supported the DTFF, because we believe in exactly the same areas that they are looking for. Now, we specifically specialised in the robotics and automation side of things, not as much within machine learning and other technologies that are available and can be talked about in some of the other webinars. So the typical process for automation, as the end user customer, you've obviously identified the need to make improvements within your facility, whether that be from a cost perspective, a production side, loads of different reasons that come into this. You're looking for something that is easy to deploy, and then once the project has been selected, it's a case of going out, finding the manufacturer who can be able to provide that, or the integrator, sitting down, negotiating out the project, going through all the different types of designs that are available. And this step can be quite daunting for a lot of people, because there's an awful lot of different types of technologies that are out there. What is the best type of technology for myself, and what is the best type for our organization? Just because it's a world-renowned piece doesn't necessarily mean it's the best fit for me. And then even when you get by that path, actually putting through the process, going through the whole FAT, SAT, the design, the testing, the validation, everything that goes into actually getting the piece to work absolutely perfect. It's great looking at YouTube on these videos that are working absolutely brilliant, but a big portion of what makes automation expensive is the amount of time that goes into testing and developing, designing all the overheads that are in there from an electrical and mechanical and a programming perspective, again, none of which resources are typically quite cheap. So throughout the stages, this is the kind of dropout that we see. We talk to customers all the time, and then maybe talk to them 3 or 4 years later and ask kind of, what have you done in the meantime? And a lot of the times the answer is not much, because they've hit challenges all along this process that have eventually means that they haven't been able to realize the improvements that they're looking for. So where reliance comes in, the process still starts exactly the same way. People are still trying to make improvements. However, we come in to assist with the selection on the technologies and with the integration through our partner networks. We work with the likes of the DTFF and other funds and everything to make things available to personnel, and also have the know-how to make sure that the process is actually delivered within that, because it's not always the same technology is right for every different company. It depends on the size, it depends on the activity, and just as Andre was talking to there earlier, quite a lot of what we would say is maybe don't actually look at the bottleneck within your process. The bottleneck might be something that you have personnel with. Look at other stages within your process that can be easily automated and easily achieved within a quick time frame and a good ROI, and then utilize the people that you are saving from them to go address the bottlenecks within your process and ultimately pull out the productivity. So that's where Reliance come in. We kind of come in as an expert within the automation field. We do an awful lot of different types of things, and we know everything in and around the actual robot, not just the robot itself. With relation to the DTFF, we're talking to you now as part of the kind of pre-application briefing. We've been with an awful lot of the councils for the briefings, and then we get involved with the expression of interest. And what's great is the expression of interests are actually being allowed to be input much earlier in the process, because typically when we look at an automation process, to try and deliver that within 3 months is actually quite challenging. And normally about 6 months is something that's a little bit more achievable, and then for larger projects maybe 12 months. But we can come in at the very early stages to talk with you through your process and identify the best types of technology, help you with the wording that is required for the application process. We, of course, step away once the process is submitted and you're waiting for your letter of offer. And then once the letter of offer is approved, we can then get back involved in the actual implementation of this through our manufacturers and through our integration and commissioning partners. So to just have a look at a few of the different types of projects that we've been involved in, palletizing has been a very, very common one that we've looked at across the DTFF. In terms of robotics, palletizing is probably one of the most standard applications that we can do at this stage. And the great thing about it, especially when we look at it from a collaborative robot perspective, is that it's a very, very flexible process. Again, coming back to not looking at stuff for mass batch production, there's plenty of processes out there that have multiple different SKUs, are changing on a regular basis, and need the ability to have that flexibility within the process. So having a robot that can easily switch between different batches and free up a personnel from that repetitive strain of lifting boxes the whole time, or just sitting there waiting for a box to come down a line, allows somebody to be repurposed somewhere else within the factory and moved on to more productive work than just lifting a box. Another application example, and this is the great thing about the new technologies that are coming out, the speed at which the technology is changing is massive. The amount of times that we've had a look at an application 2 years ago and said, unfortunately at this moment it's uneconomical to address this, it doesn't have the return on ROI. Within a year or two there may be an off-the-shelf solution for exactly the same thing. Such is the speed that the technology is moving on at the whole time. The collaborative robot side of things is also great because typically they don't take up the same footprint as the industrial robots, and they also have the ability to be able to work alongside personnel, not necessarily with the same amount of safety fencing and caging, purely because they have safety features built into the robots themselves. Outside of palletizing, machine tending is another area that we've done a huge amount of work, and again, especially through the DTFF. Now, when we look at this process ahead of us, we're specifically looking at CNC machine tending, but machine tending could be anything that requires a sample or a product to essentially be moved from one stage where your machine is performing the operation. It's only the loading and unloading that is required from the robot. Again, we're looking to increase the productivity of the people that are in these environments. There's no point in having somebody standing there waiting beside a machine to provide something in and out when they should be off setting up the next machine, doing the things that require the skilled work to achieve, and then let the robot address it. One example of a facility where we've implemented these, they've actually completely changed their production schedule based on the fact that the robots are involved now. So instead of having one personnel looking after 2 or 3 machines, they have one person looking after about a cell of 8 or 9, and then several robots within that. So they're spending a half an hour setting up the tooling, and then the robot goes ahead and does the work then afterwards. It also allows them to do things like work after hours, so the robots can be used in a lights out scenario, whereby the next morning somebody comes in and there's all the work has been produced for them, and then they can just move on to another task. It doesn't always have to be the robot loading a machine. It can also be the robot manipulating the product. So, for example, in this one, looking at one where it's grinding an application or taking a deborer off something, that could be into tooling as well. So for drilling holes, or even applications such as kind of spray painting or sanding. It's anything that allows it to manipulate the product throughout the process. And the common thing about all these pieces that we've seen through, it's not just the robot we're looking at. The robot is the nice flashy piece that is moving in the middle of it. But what we have to consider is, how are we getting the product to the robot? What's happening after the product is there? Is there any kind of impact or feedback required to the robot to provide its task? Is there quality assessment that's required? How are we tracking these orders as they're going through the system? So while all the videos are great, they show brilliant activities, there's an awful lot of other things that need to be considered as part of an automation process. And that's exactly what we as Reliance Automation come in to do, is to advise on these processes to make sure that a company is digitally ready to be able to accept them. Now, not every robot has to be your standard 6-axis robot. Okay, so in this video, you will actually see a number of single-axis robots that have all been put together to make a several-axis machine. So within this one, there's actually probably more than 6 axes, but as you can see, it's performing multiple tasks within there. So it's not always a case whereby a 6-axis robot is required. A 6-axis robot provides an awful lot of flexibility, but sometimes it's more economical to provide it up of a lot more small pieces and utilize that to achieve a task. And similarly, a lot of these things that we're talking about in terms of ease of use and modularity have really improved in the last good few years. It's no longer a case whereby you constantly have to have somebody on staff with an automation degree of training for a robot or an actuator for months on end to be able to understand how to program it within your process. Democratization of robotics is a big thing that's been pushed out lately, whereby a lot of the stuff is smart programming, whereby you're using things like Blockly and similar other programming technologies to essentially set up processes that are zero programming. You're just inputting your pick position and your place position, and the applications themselves have already been built out from that, and you can just work through it nice and easy, so there's a quick and painless switch over for different types of activities. So that's a short introduction into a few of the different types of text that we've done specifically with the DTFF, but there are loads of different other opportunities that are out there. We commonly go out and audit sites to be able to identify opportunities within your production line, and as I said, isn't necessarily always the bottleneck. It may be a case that there are other individual processes that can be automated or semi-automated to be able to release personnel for other tasks. And we have had a number of clients who have, because of the automation, been able to take on larger processes. One quick example is, again, a machine tending operation. The parts were relatively low cost. It was a case whereby they couldn't address that part because the labor cost of doing so was so high. If they took on a robot, and then from that position of being able to run the robot overnight, they were able to take an order for a few thousand products. And this is where automation, when we're talking about this, it does look more like production automation, but the whole idea is to make your processes more efficient, so you can take on additional personnel for processing orders and take on additional orders to make the company more profitable and also more economical. So if you'd like to have a discussion about any of those points, or if there's any questions that you have at all, in and around automating, or what steps or even what stage am I at within the automation process, please feel free to contact us and we'd be more than happy to talk you through. Thank you.
So thank you, David, for this. I will take just a couple of more minutes of your time to introduce you to the support that's available for the DTFF funding scheme. So as I said, the DTFF itself does not provide directly this support, but there is a support network built around it. So you can contact Queen's University Belfast through the Clinton Leadership Institute or through the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation Center. And we can point you out in the right direction. The same goes for University of Ulster and the Smart Manufacturing Data Hub. At this point, the further education colleges across Northern Ireland, they are involved in this funding scheme, and they have dedicated teams who can help companies find relevant solutions for their problems and tailor their applications so that they can increase the chance of support. Also, local authorities, they have the Go Succeed program, and there is available support through Innovate NI. At Queen's, for the purpose of developing staff in the direction of digital transformation and so on, we have small programs that are customized and designed specifically to meet the needs of companies. So we have programs in terms of leading strategic change for digital transformation and emerging technologies. And these programs can be tailored to meet the needs of the interested companies. Also, all these webinars are available online on the YouTube channel of the Clinton Leadership Institute. So you can scan that barcode and access it, and you will see the entire series of webinars, not just the series, but also the previous series of webinars. And lastly, please consider attending the other webinars as well if they seem relevant for your organization. Now, I think for the last few minutes, we can take any questions if there are any. So if you have questions, please feel free to unmute your mic and tell us what your concerns are. Well, if there aren't any questions, I mean, please feel free to type them into the chat box if that's more comfortable. But if there aren't any questions, I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar. And please, if you find it useful, go to the YouTube channel and watch the entire series of webinars that's provided by the Clinton Leadership Institute, and do get in touch if you need support with your DTFF funding application. So thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.